I want to talk about your paper, get you some ideas to start you off. There are three possible topics. You're going to pick one. It's either art for survival, art and humanity, or art and architecture. So you're going to want to take a minute and look at the images that are attached there and pick what you think you're most comfortable with. The paper is 4 pages. It's 100 point possible. If you want to be up for the 100 points, you need to write all 4 pages double spaced. If you write 3 pages, you'll be up for 75 points. If you write 2 pages, you're up for 50 points. So it's kind of, choose your own adventure. Choose how many points you want to be up for. Write the whole 4 pages and you'll be up for 100 points. Your paper needs to start with an introduction. Sometimes I think the introduction is almost easier to write after you've written about the images. Your introduction is going to want to be pretty, sort of pretty generic, where you are going to introduce your theme, survival, and then say, these are the 3 periods that I'm going to discuss to see how the common thread of survival ties these works of art together. So you're going to keep that a little bit on the generic side. After you address the images, you may want to go back and revisit that intro. You don't want to steal your thunder in the intro, meaning you don't want to write about what you're going to address in the images, but rather the intro is to set you up to discuss each of the images in your topic. When you address the images, my advice would be to stay with the same organization as you move through. And when I look at the 3 topics here, I will remember to talk about that a little more. But if you first talk about sort of history or culture or time period and then the image, make sure that when you move to your second image, you do the same thing. First address background, history, overview, and then talk about the image. Just makes it easier for your reader if it's well organized. And then at the end, you're going to want to have a conclusion. Conclusions are always a little bit dicey in a 4-page paper because you just said the information, so nobody's forgotten it by the time they hit the 4th page. So sometimes a conclusion's a good time to maybe bring in other images, maybe stay with the same topic, but introduce an image that you choose on your own. You have to address the images that I give you, but you are free to bring in images that bolster your point. So it might be a good time to do that. And I'll talk about that when we look at the actual images. And then you need a works cited page. You might need a works cited page. You could probably write this paper by just going with your lecture notes. You don't want to copy everything I say. You can't plagiarize what I say, but everything I have said in the lectures is under the realm of common knowledge, meaning you could find it in my lectures, in any lecture, across the country and in most textbooks. So you really don't have to cite me. So if you're going with your knowledge that you've gleaned from lecture, then you probably don't need a works cited page or citing. But if you use the textbook, or if you go online, then you're going to need to cite in the body of the paper. So this is citing in the body of the paper. So, Kleiner 356, and where you use that particular page. And then after citing in the body of the paper, you would have to do a works cited page. That would be the 5th page of your paper. And I did one here for a book and how you would cite a website. So again, you don't need to if you stay off the internet and stay out of your book. There's no shame in using a quote from the book or getting some more information there. I think that's great. Just be really careful about your citing. If you plagiarize, you will get a 0 and there's no redos. It's the end of this semester and I'm not going to read your paper twice. So please, please, please be very careful. And if you need help, please ask. All right, so let's look at the topics. The first one is art for survival. It starts in prehistory, gives you an idea of what this topic is about. How do these images ensure art for survival? So the first one is prehistory. So you're going to want to talk about what it was like during this hunter-gatherer time. And so talk about the overview, talk about the history, and then talk about the image and how does this image help to ensure survival for the hunter-gatherer / artist. Make sure that you are looking at terminology. No matter what topic you use, go through the term sheet. And so, remember, you're going to want things like twisted perspective. Well, what is that and why was it used? So remember, make yourself a little checklist, the overview, the history, the background, then address the image, making sure you go back to the idea of survival. You don't want to say something unless it has to do with survival. So you may know something about this image, where Lascaux is, or, that there's a separate cave set up for visitors. Like, that's all interesting, but That's not really part of your paper because it has nothing to do with survival. So if you're going to say it, make sure it's adding to the theme of the topic of your paper. Then the ancient Near East is next. You're going to want to make a nice transition sentence between prehistory and the ancient Near East. This is the beginning of a civilization. This is the time of religion, and then discuss the images. What are they? Who are they? Where would they be found? Why do they look the way they do? Adding in terminology as you go. Um, Let me mention also, no matter what paper, as I said before, you can always put in ancillary images. So if you're talking about art in the service of religion, um, I'm sorry, art in the service of survival, and you want to talk about another work of art from the ancient Near East that had to do with survival, you can by all means bring that in and address that image. You can attach the image, or you can just use the name, the date, the title of the work. Just make sure you have a full reference for it. If, as you're going through and writing your paper, you want to attach images, I think that always looks really nice. Embed them into your paper. Please do so, but make sure it's not taking up writing space. It has to be a full 4 pages. And then after that is Egypt. This one is sort of takes a little bit of a turn because with Egypt, we talk about these are Ka statues. And so it has to do with survival in the next life and not in this life. So that one's your little sort of different one in this set of images. And then, of course, you would end your paper with a conclusion. The second one, if you are interested, is art and humanity. How did these images portray the human form throughout history? So the ancient Greeks, who were the ancient Greeks? What did they believe? How did they think about humanism? And then discuss the image. How does this image reflect the Greek concept of the human body? And then ancient Rome, well, what did they believe in? They believed in humanism, but how was it different? What was important to them? Commemoration, portraiture. How does this reflect the Roman belief system? Making sure, of course, you get that terminology in. And then the Byzantine is your image again that kind of comes out of left field. The Byzantine shows us a very different human body during the Middle Ages with a religious worldview. And now the human body, nudity is shameful. It's not like the beautiful Greek nude. And Adam and Eve are usually associated with sort of sin and shame. So it's a different way to look at the human body. And then your last image, if you're interested in architecture, has 3 buildings to discuss, but I give you 2 views of each building. So it feels like more images, but it's not. How do they illustrate the concept of form follows function? So how does the form of the building follow how it was used, what its function was? So your first building is the Basilica Ulpia in Rome. So after an intro talking about how a building's form has to be dictated by its function, you would discuss first the Basilica Ulpia. What was this building used for? Where would you enter? What would go on there? And how does the shape of the building perfect for what they needed? The second one would be the early Christian. This is a basilican church. And what did the Christians need? What did they need to go on in the building? And how did they borrow from the basilica we just saw? So this is one where you're always sort of feeding off what came before. So with the early Christian, you're going to want to say, well, what did they change? Where do you enter now into the church? Where's your focus? Where's that Roman triumphal arch? And then the last one is your Romanesque. So in the Middle Ages, in the Romanesque period, how did the concept of the church change? What was going on in society? So you're going to want to talk about a little bit of feudalism and monasticism, but certainly about pilgrimage. What was added? What was changed from the early Christian church? Because now we're going to go see the relic here. So what are those parts of the building that are changed? And then, of course, here's our interior view. So you can talk about the Roman arch and sort of what puts the Roman in Romanesque. This is an ideal paper if you tend to be really succinct in your writing and you're worried about getting to 4 pages because there's a lot to write in this one. Humanity maybe a little bit less. That second paper maybe a little bit less. Okay, so hopefully this helps. And if you have any questions along the way, please make sure that you reach out. I'd be more than happy to look at an outline if you would like me to, or read what you have started. All right.